The billionaire's baby had been screaming for hours, until a poor black teenager from economy stepped forward. The moment their eyes met, the jet went silent, and the baby laughed like he'd seen a ghost. But no one on that plane knew that laugh was about to uncover a secret that would change both their lives forever. The luxury cabin of Flight 209 shimmered with quiet opulence. Golden chandeliers reflected softly off crystal glasses, and the hum of soft jazz filled the air. Then came a sound that shattered it all. A baby's cry, sharp, loud, relentless. 6-month-old Hanson Johnson, the only child of tech billionaire Jared Johnson, was screaming as if the world had wronged him personally. For nearly 3 hours, Jared had tried everything humanly possible, or at least everything a man who built robots could think of. He rocked his son in his arms, whispered soothing words, played gentle white noise from his tablet, even hummed the melody of his wife's favorite lullaby. Nothing worked. The louder Jared pleaded, the louder Hanson wailed, his tiny lungs defying the billionaire's composure and the silence of first class. Across the aisle, 2 passengers exchanged irritated looks. A man muttered, "Even money can't buy quiet." A socialite sighed dramatically and pulled her designer sleep mask over her eyes. The flight attendants, still wearing their professional smiles, tried to help, offering bottles, toys, and advice that only seemed to make things worse. Jared's face flushed red. He was used to commanding rooms full of investors, but now, he couldn't even calm his own child. For a man who had conquered markets, this was the first battle he was losing, publicly. And then, something strange happened. From behind the heavy curtain separating first class from economy, a quiet voice spoke. "Sir, may I try?" The murmuring passengers froze. Heads turned. Standing in the aisle was a teenage boy, maybe 16, wearing a faded orange t-shirt and worn-out jeans. His shoes were scuffed, his backpack patched with tape, but his eyes, they were calm, steady, full of a warmth that didn't belong to fear. Jared blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me." The boy stepped closer, his tone respectful. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. I take care of my baby sister back home. Sometimes when she cries like that, I can help." Before Jared could answer, a few first-class passengers snickered. One whispered, "Oh please, this is absurd." But Jared, exhausted, humiliated, and out of options, simply nodded. "Go ahead." The boy gently reached for baby Hanson. The flight attendant hesitated but said nothing as Jared reluctantly handed his crying son over. And then, silence. Instant, pure silence. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath. Hanson blinked up at the stranger holding him, and then, to everyone's shock, burst out laughing. It wasn't a small giggle, it was deep, uncontrollable belly laughter, the kind only babies know how to make. He kicked his legs, grabbed the boy's face, and laughed harder each time he saw it. The cabin gasped. Even the annoyed socialite peeked over her mask, stunned. The sound of laughter rolled through the air like magic. Jared's mouth fell open. "How did you?" The boy smiled softly, bouncing Hanson with quiet confidence. "My sister used to cry like this when she missed our mom. It took me months to figure out how to calm her. Turns out babies don't always want toys. Sometimes they just want connection." The billionaire stared. This boy, poor, humble, out of place in this floating world of wealth, had done what professional nannies and child experts could not. He noticed the boy's backpack. The side was covered in small paper badges, math formulas, competition stickers, and scribbled notes in precise handwriting. Something in Jared's mind clicked. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Elijah, sir." "Elijah Diaz," the boy replied. "I'm on my way to London to compete in the International Math Challenge. My school helped raise money for my ticket." Jared looked down at his now giggling son, the same child who'd been inconsolable moments ago, and back at Elijah. For the first time in years, he felt something stir that no technology or fortune had given him: humility. He had no idea that this small act, a stranger calming his son, would ignite a story of kindness, genius, and legacy that neither of them could forget. As the passengers whispered in awe, Jared's thoughts drifted to his wife back home and the strange sense that fate had just boarded his flight. A billionaire's baby laughed uncontrollably on a plane, because of a poor boy's face. But what happened after that laughter would change both their lives forever. When Flight 209 touched down at Heathrow, Jared Johnson was still replaying that moment over and over in his mind. the silence, the laughter, and the boy who had somehow turned chaos into calm. Even after the plane's engines powered down and passengers stood to collect their belongings, Jared remained in his seat for a moment, staring at his sleeping son. Hanson's tiny chest rose and fell peacefully, a small smile still resting on his lips, as if he were dreaming about the stranger who made him laugh. Jared had faced countless boardroom crises, but nothing had felt as personal, as humbling as this. A boy from the back of the plane had done what money, expertise, and logic could not. And that haunted him. He packed up quietly, thanked the flight attendants, and carried Hanson down the jet bridge. Cameras flashed as paparazzi snapped photos of the billionaire traveling with his son. He smiled for none of them. His thoughts were elsewhere, somewhere between gratitude and curiosity. At baggage claim, the carousel spun with polished suitcases and monogrammed trunks. Jared's assistant had already arrived to collect his things, but he waved her off, scanning the crowd. And then he saw him. Standing near the far end of the hall, half hidden behind a column, was the boy. Elijah Diaz. The orange t-shirt was wrinkled now, his jeans faded gray at the knees. His small duffel bag sat on the floor beside him, torn open at one corner and held together with safety pins. Inside, Jared noticed the corner of a spiral notebook, covered in math symbols, faint pencil smudges, and creased pages. Elijah was clutching his boarding pass and passport, eyes darting between the arrival board and his worn backpack as if trying to decide which one might disappear first. Jared walked over slowly, still holding Hanson in one arm. Elijah. The boy turned, startled. "Oh, Mr. Johnson. I didn't think you'd even remember me." Jared smiled faintly. Hard to forget someone who saved a whole plane from losing its mind. Elijah chuckled softly but lowered his eyes, embarrassed. "I didn't really save anyone, sir. Just a baby." "That baby happens to be my son," Jared said, shifting Hanson, who was now awake. And the moment Elijah smiled, Hanson laughed again, that same bubbling laugh that had captured the entire cabin. The sound drew a few curious glances from nearby travelers. Jared found himself laughing too, the absurd, genuine kind of laugh that felt unfamiliar but good. "You see," Jared said. "He remembers you." Elijah smiled, then looked away quickly, uncomfortable under the billionaire's gaze. Jared noticed the way the boy's hand lingered over his stomach, the kind of unconscious gesture that spoke of hunger. His voice softened. "Have you eaten?" Elijah hesitated. "Not really, sir. The airline snacks were kind of expensive. But I'm okay." Jared frowned. "You're not okay. You're a teenager traveling alone to another country. You calmed my son when no one else could. The least I can do is buy you breakfast." Elijah's first instinct was to refuse, pride flickering in his eyes, but the growl from his stomach betrayed him. He gave a small nod. They sat at a quiet cafe near the terminal. Elijah devoured a simple English breakfast with quiet gratitude, trying not to make it obvious how hungry he was. Jared watched, fascinated by his manner, polite, restrained, with that quiet dignity only hardship could teach. "So," Jared said, sipping his coffee, "London for vacation?" Elijah shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I'm here for the International Math Challenge. My school raised money for my flight. The competition covers housing for the week." Jared raised his brows. "The International Challenge? That's impressive. You must be brilliant." Elijah shrugged modestly. "Numbers just make sense to me, sir. They don't care if you're rich or poor. They just follow truth." That line stayed with Jared. Numbers don't care if you're rich or poor. It was said so simply, but it struck deep. He leaned forward. "Tell me about your family, Elijah." Elijah's fork paused mid-air. "It's just my mom and my baby sister. We live in Brooklyn, near the old bus depot. My mom works night shifts as a nurse's aide. She wanted to come see me off, but she couldn't afford to miss work. My dad passed 3 years ago, car accident. He was driving his taxi when the brakes failed. He stayed behind the wheel to steer it off the bridge so the passengers could get out." Jared's breath caught. "He died saving them?" Elijah nodded, his tone even, though his eyes shimmered. "Mom said he was a hero. I think he was just good. He always told me, 'Son, you can't change how the world looks at you, but you can change what you give back.'" For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. Hansen babbled softly, breaking the silence with a small giggle that somehow fit perfectly into the moment, as if even he understood. When the meal ended, Jared checked his watch. He had a chauffeur waiting, a meeting in 2 hours, and a dozen emails demanding attention. But for the first time in years, business didn't feel urgent. "Elijah," he said carefully, "I have an idea. You don't know anyone in London, right?" "No, sir." "Then stay with me. I've got space, more than enough. You can focus on your competition, and I'll make sure you're taken care of." Elijah froze. "Stay with you?" "Sir, I couldn't." "Why not?" Jared asked. "Because people like me don't stay in places like yours." Jared smiled, not mockingly but with a sadness that understood. Maybe it's time that changed. Elijah looked down at his worn shoes, torn laces fraying at the ends. "Sir, I appreciate it really. But I don't want pity." "Then don't take it as pity," Jared said. "Take it as repayment for the peace you gave me. You calmed my son, maybe you can teach me how." Elijah laughed softly, unsure what to say. In the end, he just nodded. "Okay, sir. Just for a night." The ride to the Johnson estate was silent except for the soft hum of the car and Hansen's occasional giggles. Elijah pressed his face close to the window, watching the London streets unfold, the glass towers, the grey rain, the old brick corners glowing under the streetlights. When the gates opened to reveal Jared's home, Elijah's jaw dropped. It wasn't just a mansion, it was a cathedral of modern wealth. White marble floors, gold-lined stairs, and ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky. He stepped inside slowly, almost afraid to breathe too loudly. His sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. Hansen, now in Jared's arms, squealed when he saw Elijah and reached for him, laughing again. Jared chuckled. He's already picked his favorite person. Elijah blushed. Guess he likes faces that aren't always smiling. That line, simple, honest, hit Jared deeper than expected. His own smiles were often for cameras, not people. They ate dinner together in the vast, echoing dining room. The billionaire with his tailored suit, the teenager with his patched bag, and the baby between them laughing at every spoonful of mashed carrots. It should have felt absurd, but instead, it felt right. Afterward, Jared showed Elijah to the guest room. As the boy dropped his torn backpack on the bed, its zipper gave way, spilling notebooks and papers across the floor. Jared picked one up, filled with equations so intricate they looked like art. "You did these?" "Yes, sir. Just practice problems." "These," Jared said quietly, "belong in a university, not a backpack." Elijah smiled faintly. "Maybe one day." Jared left him there, but as he walked down the hall, he caught himself thinking not about business deals or markets, but about a hungry boy with a broken backpack who somehow made his son laugh and made him feel human again. That night, as rain tapped softly on the mansion windows, Elijah stood by the glass, staring out at the lights of London. In another part of the house, Jared sat in the nursery, watching Hansen sleep. He thought of Elijah's words, "Numbers don't care if you're rich or poor." Maybe life shouldn't, either. The mansion had never felt so quiet, or so alive. Would you open your door to a stranger, if your heart told you to? Morning sunlight filtered through the glass walls of the Johnson estate, painting streaks of gold across the marble floors. Elijah woke to the soft hum of the city beyond the hills, so far from Brooklyn, it almost felt unreal. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the high ceiling and the crisp linen sheets. The bed was too big. The silence was too clean. It reminded him that this wasn't his world. Yet somewhere down the hall, he could hear baby Hansen's laughter echoing faintly, that pure bubbling sound that had started all of this. He smiled, pulled on his worn jeans and orange t-shirt, and tiptoed downstairs. In the living room, Jared Johnson sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by baby toys and a very unimpressed Hansen who was determined to throw each one in a different direction. When Jared noticed Elijah, he grinned. "You're up early. I was beginning to think Billionaire'S had the market cornered on sleepless nights." Elijah chuckled, kneeling beside them. "I usually wake up at 5 back home. My mom works nights, so I handle mornings with my sister. Guess it stuck." "Lucky me," Jared said, handing over a toy airplane that Hansen had just tossed. "I think he's testing gravity." "Or your patience," Elijah said with a grin. As if on cue, Hansen squealed and clapped his hands, his laughter filling the room. Jared shook his head but smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite one he wore at conferences. He was realizing something he hadn't in years: peace could live in chaos. Later that morning, Jared went to his study to prepare for a conference call. When he entered, he found Elijah standing near the desk, staring at a half-disassembled device. The boy quickly stepped back. "Sorry, sir. I didn't touch anything. I just saw that it wasn't working right." Jared glanced at the object, a digital photo frame that had been broken for months. "That thing? Don't worry about it." Even the repair techs gave up. Elijah tilted his head, then reached for a small screwdriver from the desk drawer. "May I try?" Before Jared could reply, Elijah had already opened the frame, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who'd been taking things apart his whole life. Within minutes, he found a corroded circuit point and a loose power connector. He adjusted it with a pen tip, tightened a wire, and reassembled it. The screen flickered. Then, life. Photos appeared one after another: Jared's wedding, his wife Sarah smiling in sunlight, a newborn Hansen wrapped in blue cloth. Jared froze. For a second, he forgot to breathe. Elijah looked up, nervous. "Did I break it worse?" Jared swallowed hard. "No, you fixed it." On the screen, Sarah's face glowed. It had been months since Jared had seen that photo, not because he didn't have access to it, but because he couldn't face it. He turned to Elijah, his voice low. "You just brought something back I thought was gone." Elijah didn't understand the full weight of those words, but he nodded respectfully. "It was just a loose connector, sir. Sometimes things stop working not because they're broken, just because they're disconnected." The boy's words landed with unexpected force. Jared sat in silence for a while, staring at his wife's smiling face on the screen, realizing how disconnected he had become, from her, from life, from the simplicity of feeling. Over the next few days, Elijah blended into the rhythm of the house like sunlight through open curtains. He studied at the large oak table in the library, surrounded by old math journals and sleek holographic tablets. He spent hours scribbling formulas on scrap paper, solving problems far beyond high school level. Sometimes, Jared would peek in quietly, watching. Elijah's concentration was different from that of any adult he knew: pure, joyful focus, untouched by ego. One evening, Jared brought 2 cups of cocoa and sat across from him. "You work like someone who's running out of time," Jared said. Elijah looked up, surprised. "Maybe I am. Back home, I don't get much quiet. Between school, helping mom, and watching my sister, there's never enough time to think." Jared nodded. "And yet here you are, halfway across the world, solving problems most grown men can't." Elijah smiled faintly. "My dad used to say math was like music. Everyone hears it, but only some people can hum it back. I don't think I'm smart, sir. I just listen better." Something about that humility stirred something deep in Jared. "You sound like him when you say that, your father." Elijah nodded, his expression softening. He was a taxi driver. Every night, he'd come home smelling like gasoline and city rain. He'd sit on our couch and make me solve one new math riddle before bed. Said it kept my brain sharper than a knife. Jared smiled. "And he died saving his passengers, right?" Elijah looked down. "Yeah. He didn't make it home that night. The brakes failed on a bridge. He could have jumped, but he stayed to steer it off the edge so the others could get out." Silence hung heavy between them. Jared's eyes misted as he whispered, "He sounds like a man I would have liked to know." Elijah gave a small, sad grin. "I think you would have. He said rich folks aren't bad people, just busy trying to fill spaces that money can't reach." Jared stared at the cocoa in his hands. That line cut deeper than he expected. His own father had died when he was 16, leaving behind a factory job, a mortgage, and a dream Jared had been trying to live up to ever since. He'd built empires, yes, but maybe he'd been trying to rebuild a father he could never save. The following week, Jared introduced Elijah to Dr. Morris, a retired mathematician and one of Jared's early mentors. Together, they began preparing Elijah for the upcoming competition. Each morning started with Hansen's laughter echoing through the halls as Elijah played peekaboo with him while waiting for breakfast. Each afternoon was a flurry of equations, practice problems, and quiet concentration in the study. And each night ended the same way, Jared sitting across the table from Elijah, watching a boy from Brooklyn do the impossible with a pencil and paper. But perfection invites attention. One afternoon, as Jared scrolled through his phone during a break between calls, a notification caught his eye. Breaking news: billionaire Jared Johnson shelters teenage math prodigy who saved his baby mid-flight. The article spread like wildfire, photos of Elijah in his faded orange shirt beside Jared in his tailored suit. Some headlines were admiring, others weren't. From rags to riches? Or billionaire's PR move? Modern-day Cinderella? Teen genius stays in London mansion. Jared set his phone down, uneasy. The media attention was inevitable, but the tone worried him. Elijah was a private kid, and fame had a way of twisting kindness into spectacle. That evening, Jared found him sitting alone on the balcony, watching the London skyline. The glow from the city lights painted a halo around his face. "You saw it, didn't you?" Jared asked. Elijah nodded slowly. "The article?" "Yeah." "I'm sorry," Jared said. "People will always talk. They see headlines before they see hearts." Elijah gave a half-smile. "I've been poor my whole life, sir. Words don't scare me." Jared chuckled softly. "They scare me more than they used to." They stood in silence for a moment before Elijah asked, "Can I tell you something, sir?" "Of course." "When I was a kid, I thought rich people never cried. I used to watch those big glass towers on TV and imagine they were filled with people who'd figured out life." "And now?" Jared asked. Elijah turned toward him. "Now I know they're just towers, tall, shiny, and lonely." Jared didn't reply. He didn't have to. Elijah had spoken a truth he'd been running from for years. A few days later, while preparing for his competition, Elijah came across a broken robot toy in Hanson's nursery. The mechanical puppy had stopped working, and the staff had planned to throw it out. Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it, rewiring the circuit with nothing but a safety pin and intuition. Minutes later, the toy barked and wagged its plastic tail again. Hanson squealed with joy, clapping his tiny hands. Jared, who had just walked in, froze at the doorway, smiling. "Elijah," he said softly, "I think you might be a magician." Elijah grinned. "Just a fixer, sir. I like figuring out how things fit together." "Maybe that's what the world needs," Jared said, picking up Hanson. "People who can fix what others think is too broken." Elijah met his eyes. "Sometimes it's not broken, sir. Just misunderstood." That night, Jared couldn't sleep. He walked through the house in silence, past the grand halls and marble stairs, until he reached his private office. On his desk sat the glowing photo frame Elijah had repaired, Sarah's smile frozen in timeless warmth. He sat down heavily. For the first time in months, he didn't open his laptop or check his stock reports. Instead, he whispered quietly to himself, "Maybe I've been building robots, when I should have been raising people." The days blurred into a quiet rhythm of study, laughter, and small moments of healing. Jared found himself confiding in Elijah more than he intended, about business, about Sarah's illness, about his own fears as a father. And Elijah listened, really listened, in a way no one else did. In return, Jared taught him things beyond math: how to think strategically, how to speak with confidence, how to negotiate opportunity without losing humility. "You don't need to become me," Jared told him one evening. "You just need to become what the world told you couldn't." Elijah smiled. "That's the nicest homework I've ever been given." The night before the International Math Challenge, the house was unusually quiet. Elijah was in the study, reviewing equations under a pool of lamplight. Hanson had already fallen asleep, a gentle rhythm of baby breaths echoing from the nursery. Jared stood by the doorway, watching the boy who had walked into his life by chance, a poor teenager who had turned a screaming baby's chaos into laughter, and somehow healed the emptiest parts of a billionaire's heart. He thought of Elijah's words again: "Sometimes things stop working not because they're broken, just because they're disconnected." He whispered to himself, "Maybe I was the one who needed fixing." As midnight neared, Jared finally spoke. "Elijah." Elijah looked up from his papers. "Yes, sir." "You ready for tomorrow?" Elijah exhaled slowly. "Ready as I'll ever be." Jared smiled. "Good. Because win or lose, you've already proven something bigger. What's that? That genius doesn't need privilege, it just needs someone to believe in it. Elijah smiled, his voice barely above a whisper. You believed in me first, sir. But maybe I believed in you too. Outside, the rain began to fall softly against the windows, London's skyline blurred in the distance. Inside the house, a billionaire and a boy from Brooklyn sat in silence, two souls from opposite worlds, bound by one simple truth: they both needed to be seen, and they both found that in each other. What if the person you saved today was destined to save you tomorrow? The morning after the competition's announcement, Jared's mansion didn't wake to laughter. It woke to chaos. It started with the hum of engines outside, black vans, flashing cameras, and murmurs from the gates. Then came the buzz of notifications that rippled through the staff like static. Headlines, photos, accusations. Tech mogul's charity stunt: billionaire uses poor teen for public sympathy. From crying baby to PR baby, Hanson's laughter goes viral. The billionaire and the boy: exploitation or redemption. The once quiet London estate had turned into a circus overnight. Jared stood by the window, phone in hand, watching reporters jostle at the gates. His face, normally unreadable, showed fatigue. Inside, Elijah sat at the breakfast table, unaware of the media frenzy brewing beyond the Golden Gates. He was focused on his notes, a half-eaten piece of toast forgotten beside him. When Jared walked in, Elijah looked up and smiled. "Morning, sir. I think I finally cracked that geometry problem Dr. Morris gave me." Jared tried to smile back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's great, Elijah. Really great." But the weight in his tone made Elijah pause. Something wrong. Jared hesitated, then set his phone on the table. The headlines glared up like accusations. Elijah's expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "They're saying you're exploiting me," he whispered. Jared rubbed his temple. "They twist anything they can't understand. Don't let it get to you." "But they don't even know me," Elijah said softly. "They don't know what really happened on that plane." Jared sighed. The world rarely asks for truth when lies get more clicks. By noon, the estate's phones were ringing non-stop. Investors called. The PR department emailed. The board of directors demanded an explanation. Inside the conference room, Jared's public relations advisor, Claire Monroe, laid out a thick file on the polished table. Her tone was sharp, professional. "Jared, this story has legs. The press is painting you as a manipulator using a poor kid to soften your image. It's going viral on every platform." "I don't care what they think," Jared replied flatly. Claire leaned forward. "You should. The board cares. Your investors care." The company's stock dropped 3 points overnight. He looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" "Let the boy go," she said, without hesitation. "End the story clean. Issue a public statement thanking him for his help, maybe a small scholarship. Then send him home." Jared's silence was deafening. Claire pressed on, her voice cooler. "Jared, you've built a billion-dollar empire on reputation. You can't risk it for a good deed gone wrong." Across the room, Jared's jaw clenched. He thought of Elijah's shy smile. The way Hanson's laughter filled the air every time the boy entered the room. He stood, his voice quiet but resolute. "I didn't build this company by doing what's convenient, Claire. I built it by doing what's right." She exhaled sharply. "Then I hope right can save your empire." That evening, Elijah sat by the fountain in the garden, headphones in, trying to drown out the voices echoing inside the mansion. He'd overheard the staff earlier, whispering by the corridor. "Can you believe the boss brought him here? A street kid. Probably a PR stunt. Looks good for the cameras. Yeah, until something goes missing." The words stung like glass splinters. He looked down at his shoes, the same worn sneakers he'd worn on the plane. He rubbed the edge of his torn backpack, a reflex that grounded him when the world spun too fast. Maybe he shouldn't have come here. Maybe this wasn't his world to fit into. Then through the window, he saw Hanson's small hand press against the glass, eyes bright as if searching for him. That little hand somehow made everything else fade. He got up and went back inside. Later that night, the house was dim, quiet. Jared had locked himself in his office, replaying his conversation with the board on repeat. They had made it clear: distance yourself or risk it all. He'd faced mergers, lawsuits, global scrutiny, but nothing had ever felt this personal. The sound of coughing drew him out of his thoughts. He followed it upstairs. Hanson's nursery light was on. Elijah was sitting beside the crib, gently rocking the baby, his face pale with worry. "He's running a fever," Elijah whispered. "I think it's from the travel. I already called the house doctor. He's on his way." Jared stepped closer, watching the boy's trembling hands on Hanson's tiny blanket. Despite the exhaustion etched across Elijah's face, his focus never wavered. Hours passed. Elijah never left the baby's side. He wiped Hanson's forehead, hummed softly, whispered gentle nonsense words to keep him calm. By dawn, the fever broke. When Jared walked in, the first rays of light were creeping through the curtains. Elijah was slumped beside the crib, asleep in the chair, head tilted against his arm. Jared stood there for a long moment, silent, still, watching this boy who had nothing give everything. Something in his chest shifted. In that moment, the noise of headlines and corporate threats meant nothing. He knew exactly what he would do. At breakfast, Claire was waiting for him again, tablet in hand. "The board meeting is in an hour. We can still release a statement." Jared cut her off. "Draft this instead." She blinked. "Excuse me." He handed her a handwritten note, his tone calm but immovable. "There are moments in life when reputation means less than humanity. This boy saved my child, reminded me of what matters, and earned not charity, but respect. I will not apologize for decency. Jared Johnson, CEO, Hanson Robotics." Claire stared at him, speechless. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," Jared replied. "Send it to every outlet that called us heartless. Let's see how they handle truth for once." By midday, the statement had spread across the internet. Some mocked it. Some praised it. But one photo silenced the noise. A leaked image of Elijah asleep beside Hanson's crib, the baby's small hand clutching his finger. It went viral instantly. The boy who stayed. Loyalty beyond blood. The same tabloids that had mocked them now hailed Elijah as the humble hero behind a billionaire's change of heart. Jared read the comments in silence that night. For every cynical remark, there were 100 messages of hope. People saw something rare, sincerity in a world obsessed with performance. And beneath all the noise, one comment stood out. "If kindness threatens your empire, maybe it's not worth having." He smiled faintly. The internet had a strange way of preaching truth in between its chaos. Later that evening, Elijah walked into Jared's study, eyes red from fatigue. "Sir," he said softly, "you didn't have to defend me like that. You could lose everything." Jared looked up from his desk. "You think I care about losing everything?" "You should," Elijah said earnestly. "You've worked your whole life for it." Jared leaned back in his chair. "I've worked my whole life to build things, but what's the point if I can't stand behind the things that matter?" Elijah hesitated. "I don't know what to say." Jared smiled gently. "Say you'll focus on that competition. Let me handle the noise." Elijah's lips trembled between gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," Jared said, leaning forward. "You've reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago, that integrity is louder than applause." Over the next few days, life slowly returned to rhythm. The paparazzi eventually lost interest, chasing fresher scandals. Inside the mansion, preparation for the International Math Challenge intensified. Jared had arranged private lessons with professors from Oxford, late-night problem-solving sessions, and mock interviews to prepare Elijah for the scrutiny ahead. The nights were long but filled with quiet laughter. Hanson was healthy again, often sitting on Elijah's lap while he scribbled equations on napkins. The baby would tug at his pen, and Elijah would playfully pretend to lose each battle. Sometimes Jared just stood at the doorway, watching, a billionaire surrounded by warmth money couldn't buy. For the first time in years, his home felt alive. But even peace has shadows. At the edge of this calm, a rival billionaire, Malcolm Crane, known for his ruthless tactics and jealousy toward Jared's success, began circling. He saw opportunity in scandal and weakness in compassion. Behind closed doors, he whispered to tabloids, planted false leads, and planned his move. Because in a world where power ruled, empathy was easy prey. On the eve of the competition, Jared stood by the window again, staring at the city lights. Claire entered quietly. "You realize, Jared, you've made enemies." He didn't turn. "Haven't I always?" "These are different," she said softly. "You embarrassed powerful people by doing the right thing." He finally turned to face her. "Then I guess it's about time I gave them something worth being embarrassed about." As the night deepened, Elijah walked into the room, nervous but determined. "Sir, I'm ready." Jared smiled, nodding toward the suitcase beside him. "Then tomorrow we make them listen, not to headlines, not to privilege but to truth." Elijah nodded. "We will." For a moment, neither said anything. The sound of rain against the glass filled the silence. Then Elijah whispered, almost to himself, "I used to think storms were things that destroyed you. But maybe they're just the world's way of washing everything clean." Jared looked at him, a quiet smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Maybe so, Elijah. Maybe so. Would you risk your empire for one act of kindness?" London's grey skyline shimmered beneath the morning drizzle as the world gathered inside the International Mathematics Challenge Hall, a glass-domed monument to intellect and prestige. Flags from 50 nations hung overhead, shimmering under the bright stage lights. Journalists lined the aisles. Cameras flashed like lightning. And at the center of it all, a 16-year-old boy from Brooklyn, standing nervously with a worn-out backpack hanging from one shoulder. Elijah Diaz. The announcer's voice boomed through the hall. "Representing the United States, Elijah Diaz." Polite applause rippled through the audience. It was distant, formal, detached. No cheering, no chants, just the kind of applause given to someone whose name nobody knew. From the front row, Jared Johnson watched, baby Hanson balanced on his knee. The child fidgeted and giggled, unaware of the tension thick enough to slice. Jared's assistant leaned closer. "Sir, the cameras are everywhere. Everyone's waiting to see if this was all worth it." Jared didn't look away from the stage. "It already is." Behind the curtain, Elijah stood in a line of competitors, most wearing suits or crisp uniforms from prestigious schools. Their badges glimmered. His was handwritten, laminated last minute by a volunteer. A tall blonde competitor from Germany glanced at him, smirking. "You're the Billionaire'S charity case, right?" Elijah froze, fingers tightening around his pencil. Another voice joined, an elegant girl from France. "I saw your story online. Quite the spectacle. Let's see if you can count without your benefactor holding your hand." The laughter was quiet but cruel. Elijah swallowed hard. "Good luck to you too," he whispered, forcing calm. The coordinator's voice came over the intercom. "Contestants, take your seats. Round 1 begins in 5 minutes." Elijah inhaled deeply. His heart pounded. His palms were slick. He thought of his mother, his little sister, and the long nights spent solving problems by candlelight. He sat down at his station, a sleek white desk with a single digital tablet and a stylus. His screen flashed his name, and beneath it, Round 1, the logic of infinity. As the challenge began, silence filled the hall except for the soft scratching of styluses. Cameras zoomed in on faces, some calm, some panicked. Elijah's screen glowed with numbers and geometric patterns that seemed to move as he stared. For 10 minutes, he couldn't focus. His mind was fogged by whispers, charity case, billionaire's pet project. He looked up, and through the blur of lights, saw the one face that steadied him, Hanson's. The baby waved one tiny hand and squealed, laughter echoing faintly through the quiet hall. The judges frowned, but Elijah smiled. The fog lifted. That sound, that laughter, had started everything. He closed his eyes briefly, hearing Jared's voice in memory. "Don't fight for praise. Fight to prove possibility." When he opened his eyes, something shifted. His hand moved with confidence. Numbers flowed like water. Equations built upon equations, symbols intertwining into beauty. The clock ticked mercilessly, but Elijah didn't feel time anymore. Just rhythm. Precision. Grace. When round one ended, the judges whispered among themselves. One leaned toward the others, pointing at Elijah's screen. He just derived a functional solution that contradicts known optimization limits. That's not possible. Another frowned. Or it's genius. The scores flashed across the massive LED screen. Elijah Diaz, 100 out of 100. A perfect score. Gasps filled the hall. Cameras turned to Jared and Hansen. The billionaire didn't smile, he just exhaled, as though releasing a storm that had raged inside him for months. Round 2 began, harder, longer, brutal. And this time, they didn't underestimate him. By the third round, fatigue set in. Elijah's hand trembled. Sweat streaked his temple. The final problem appeared on the screen, a proof so complex it was whispered to be unsolvable in real time. Competitors froze. Some gave up entirely. Elijah stared at it for a long moment. Then he pulled a folded paper from his backpack, a note, worn and soft around the edges. His father's handwriting. When life gives you impossible equations, remember, not all solutions need to be found in numbers. Some come from courage. He smiled faintly, tucked it back, and began to write. Line after line filled the screen. The room held its breath. The judges leaned in. Minutes bled into an hour, but Elijah didn't stop. And then, it happened. A final equation appeared, clean, symmetrical, and flawless. He submitted with one tap. The algorithm verified. Solution confirmed. The board flashed solved, validated. For the first time in competition history, the impossible question had been solved live. The silence that followed was thunderous. Then, applause erupted, hesitant at first, then roaring. Judges stood. Cameras exploded in flashes. Reporters scrambled to capture his face, the boy who had rewritten the boundaries of possibility. Jared rose from his seat, Hansen in his arms. The baby's laughter echoed again, pure and unstoppable. Elijah looked up, tears slipping free despite himself. He didn't see the crowd. He saw them, Jared and Hansen, smiling like family. Backstage, chaos reigned. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust into his face. Elijah, how does it feel to make history? Did Mr. Johnson help you solve it? Are you aware your name is trending globally? Elijah blinked, overwhelmed. I just wanted to prove something. What's that? A journalist pressed. He hesitated, then said softly, that genius isn't about where you're born. It's about what you choose to see when the world doubts you. Hours later, the official announcement was made, Elijah Diaz, champion of the International Mathematics Challenge 2025. He stood on the stage, trophy in hand, lights blazing down on him. The announcer declared his name again, and this time, the applause wasn't polite. It was thunderous. In the front row, Jared clapped slowly, pride in his eyes. Hansen, as if on cue, burst into laughter, loud and contagious. Even the host chuckled. Elijah lifted the trophy high, but his eyes found Jared's. Their gaze held for a moment, silent gratitude, father and son not by blood, but by choice. That night, at the victory dinner hosted by the foundation, Elijah wore a borrowed suit. It was slightly too big, but the confidence in his eyes filled every inch of it. Jared raised a glass. To Elijah Diaz, he said. The boy who reminded the world that brilliance knows no price tag. Laughter and applause followed. Elijah looked around at the faces, politicians, investors, scholars, all once out of his reach. He leaned closer to Jared. Sir, he said quietly, I don't know how to thank you. Jared shook his head. Don't. Just keep proving them wrong. As the evening wound down, Elijah found a quiet corner by the window overlooking the London skyline. He held the trophy loosely, staring at his reflection in the glass. He saw the same boy from Brooklyn, same eyes, same scars. But something inside had changed. He'd faced the world that doubted him. And he'd won. Marisol's words from months ago echoed in his mind, you'll do something that makes the world look twice. He smiled. Guess you were right, sis. Behind him, Jared approached, Hansen now asleep in his arms. The billionaire looked more relaxed than Elijah had ever seen him. You did good, Jared said softly. You made history. Elijah turned, eyes bright. We did. Jared chuckled. Maybe. But this, he nodded toward the trophy, this belongs to you. No, sir, Elijah said. It belongs to him. He pointed to the sleeping baby. He believed in me before I did. Jared laughed quietly. You sound like his godfather already. Maybe I am. For a moment, the two just stood there, gazing at the city lights, knowing their worlds had forever intertwined. The next morning, news broke globally. Teen prodigy from Brooklyn solves impossible equation. From poverty to genius, Elijah Diaz redefines brilliance. Billionaire and boy, the story that made the world believe again. Editorials flooded in. Commentators called it a modern miracle. Schools requested Elijah to speak. Politicians tweeted quotes from his post-win interview. But to Jared, none of that mattered. Because when he returned to his hotel room that morning, Elijah was sitting on the floor, no cameras, no spotlight, playing peekaboo with baby Hanson, whose laughter filled the suite again. That laughter, once born from chaos at 35,000 feet, had now become the sound of healing, of hope, of possibility reborn. Can brilliance truly break the walls built by prejudice? The morning after the competition, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Jared Johnson's London penthouse. Newspapers covered every inch of the marble breakfast table, all shouting the same name. Elijah Diaz, the boy who solved the impossible. Billionaire mentor and math prodigy, the story that melted the internet. Jared smiled faintly as he sipped his coffee. Hanson giggled in his high chair, smearing oatmeal on his bib. Elijah sat across the table, still dazed from the whirlwind of interviews and camera flashes. Enjoy it, Jared said. The world doesn't stay kind for long, but you deserve this moment. Elijah chuckled softly. Sir, I still can't believe it's real. Yesterday I was fixing fans for neighbors back home, and now, he gestured toward the headlines, I'm sitting here with a man who owns half of Silicon Valley. Jared laughed. A little less than half. The warmth in that room was real, the kind that builds only after shared struggle. Neither of them knew it would be the last truly peaceful morning for a long time. 3 days later, the first storm hit. A headline appeared online. Shocking. Teen prodigy caught sneaking into Johnson Robotics data lab. Was the competition rigged? It was followed by grainy black and white footage from Jared's London estate. The video showed Elijah walking into a restricted section of Jared's research lab late at night, carrying a backpack. The narration was merciless. Exclusive footage reveals that the so-called genius boy accessed private AI schematics belonging to Hanson Robotics hours before the International Math Challenge. The clip went viral in minutes. News anchors debated it, social media exploded, and hashtags began trending globally. Hashtag the fake genius, hashtag stolen equations, hashtag the billionaire and the boy. Within hours, Jared's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Board members, investors, publicists, lawyers. At the estate, Elijah stood frozen in front of the TV. His hands shook as he watched himself walking down that hallway. I didn't do that, he whispered, voice trembling. That's not how it happened. Jared turned to him, eyes dark with confusion. You were in the lab that night? Yes, but, sir, you said I could look around. I wanted to see the robotics models. I didn't touch anything. Then why does it look like you plugged something in? Elijah's voice cracked. I didn't. That's not me doing that part, it's edited. I swear. But the phone kept buzzing. Another message from Jared's PR manager. Sir, the board is meeting. You need to get ahead of this. Now. By evening, helicopters hovered above the mansion gates. Reporters swarmed outside, shouting questions. Mr. Johnson, are you aware your protege accessed confidential data? Elijah, did you steal from the man who saved you? Was the entire competition a publicity stunt? Security escorted them inside. Elijah stood near the window, pale, terrified. Sir, he said quietly, you have to believe me. Jared rubbed his temples, exhaustion and pressure grinding through his bones. I want to, Elijah. But right now, everyone's watching. I have to protect the company. Protect the company? Elijah echoed, his voice breaking. You think I'd ever hurt you? It's not about that. Then what is it about? Elijah's tone rose, anger bleeding through pain. I thought we were family. Jared's jaw tightened. This isn't personal. But it is to me, Elijah whispered. That night, police arrived at the estate. The flashing blue lights reflected off the white marble walls like shards of accusation. Reporters filmed every second as officers stepped through the gates. Mr. Elijah Diaz, one of them said formally, you are under investigation for unauthorized access to restricted data belonging to Hanson Robotics. Jared stood at the top of the staircase, Hanson crying in his arms. Is this necessary? He's a minor. It's procedure, sir. We just need to bring him in for questioning. Elijah raised his hand slowly, disbelief etched across his face. Sir, he said softly, eyes locked on Jared's, tell them it's a mistake. Jared hesitated. His PR manager's words echoed in his mind. Distance yourself. Let the investigation play out. The company can't afford another scandal. In that split second of silence, that hesitation, something in Elijah's expression shattered. The officers cuffed him gently, leading him toward the door. Cameras flashed. And as Elijah passed Jared, he whispered, I never stole anything but your trust. The words hit harder than any accusation. Hanson began wailing, arms outstretched toward Elijah, small hands reaching for the boy who had once made him laugh. But the police car door closed, and the crying echoed through the marble halls long after the car disappeared. The next morning, the world had turned cruel. News anchors dissected the footage, analysts debated Elijah's intentions, and social media became a war zone. Classic case of using sympathy for access, one pundit sneered. The billionaire's ego blinded him. This is why charity backfires. Jared's investors demanded answers. The stock price of Hanson Robotics dipped 4% overnight. In a tense boardroom meeting, Jared's CFO slammed a tablet down. You've endangered everything we've built over a teenager's sob story. The shareholders are panicking. Jared's eyes narrowed. He's not a sob story. He's a human being. Then act like a CEO, not a savior, another board member snapped. Cut ties now. For the first time in years, Jared felt small in a room he once controlled. Meanwhile, at the police station, Elijah sat in a cold gray room. No handcuffs now, just silence. A detective placed a folder in front of him. Security footage. Data timestamps. Your access badge was used at 10:43 p.m. Elijah swallowed. Someone cloned it. I didn't do this. The detective leaned back. You're a smart kid. But smart kids sometimes make mistakes when they get too close to money. Elijah looked him in the eye. You think because I'm poor, I must be desperate enough to steal? The detective didn't answer. Hours passed. Questions repeated. Finally, they let him go, pending investigation. When he stepped outside, reporters swarmed him again. Elijah, are you guilty? Did Mr. Johnson pay you to take the fall? He kept walking, head down. At home, Jared watched the footage replay again and again, pausing, zooming, rewinding. Something felt wrong. The timestamps were inconsistent. The camera angles too clean. Then his security chief entered the room, face pale. Sir, he said quietly, we found something. The footage came from a backup server in Zurich, one only a few senior executives have access to. Jared's heart dropped. Who? The man hesitated. Richard Hale. He's been meeting with your rival, Marcus Steele, for months. A cold silence filled the room. Jared turned slowly toward the window, city lights flickering below. It was never about Elijah, he whispered. It was about me. That night, Jared sat by Hanson's crib. The baby had finally stopped crying after hours of distress. But as Jared stroked his son's hair, the guilt hit him like a wave. He had promised to protect Elijah, to believe in him. And when it mattered most, he'd stayed silent. He thought back to the laughter on the plane, that first spark of connection that had shattered all barriers. He remembered Elijah's face, pale under flashing lights, whispering those final words. I never stole anything but your trust. Jared felt something inside him break. He picked up his phone. Get me Detective Miles Carver, he said. Now. The next day, Jared walked into the police department, flanked by lawyers, not to defend himself, but to tell the truth. "I have evidence," he said firmly. "The footage was fabricated. It came from my rival's network. And I let a child suffer for my silence." The detective raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Johnson." "It's not an accusation," Jared said. "It's a confession." By evening, the internet had flipped again. Billionaire exposes corporate conspiracy. Teen prodigy vindicated. Rival tech giant under investigation for fabricating evidence. Elijah was cleared of all suspicion. But when Jared went to find him, the boy was gone. He'd checked out of the hotel quietly, leaving behind only a note on hotel stationery. "Thank you for everything, sir. I know you didn't mean to doubt me. But I need to find out who I am without the world deciding for me. Elijah." Jared stared at the note for a long time, then folded it gently. He looked down at Hanson, who was staring up at him, wide-eyed, innocent, forgiving. He whispered, voice trembling, "I'll bring him home, son. I promise." What's more fragile, truth or trust? The marble courthouse in Westminster was swarmed by press vans, camera drones, and restless reporters waiting for the trial that had gripped the world, the billionaire and the boy. Inside, the echo of polished shoes and murmured gossip filled the air. The heavy wooden doors opened, and Elijah Diaz stepped into the courtroom. He wasn't in a designer suit. He wore a simple gray shirt and dark trousers, his only luxury being the courage in his eyes. Jared Johnson was already there, sitting quietly in the front row beside his lawyers. His face was drawn, his once polished confidence replaced with a kind of humility that only comes from guilt and awakening. When Elijah entered, Jared stood, not out of habit, but respect. Elijah's eyes flicked toward him. For a second, neither spoke. But in that silent exchange, everything unsaid since the night of his arrest lingered: pain, disappointment, and an unbroken thread of faith. The world divided. Outside, the media had built their own storylines. Elijah Diaz, genius or con artist? Can a billionaire truly be the victim? Truth on trial. Inside, it was colder, quieter, a temple of judgment where reputations lived or died by evidence, not emotion. Detective Miles Carver, the man Jared had contacted, sat near the front, a sealed folder on his lap. His face was unreadable. As the judge entered, everyone rose. Cameras clicked once before the order for silence echoed. Case number 7743, the state versus Elijah Diaz, accused of corporate data theft and breach of private intellectual property. Elijah sat down at the defendant's table beside his court-appointed lawyer, a woman in her 40s named Ms. Reeves. But when Jared's top attorney offered to take over, Elijah shook his head firmly. "I appreciate it," he whispered, "but I don't want to win because of money. I'll prove I'm innocent with facts, not fortune." The statement, overheard by nearby journalists, spread across social media within minutes. #FactsNotFortune trended worldwide. The prosecution's fire. The prosecution began ruthlessly. Screens lit up with security footage, the same doctored clip showing Elijah entering Jared's restricted lab. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor began, "this footage clearly shows the defendant using his position of trust to access classified AI schematics. This was not an accident. It was calculated theft." Elijah's face remained calm, though his hands trembled under the table. The prosecutor continued, "Mr. Diaz conveniently won an international math competition the very next day, using formulas remarkably similar to those in Hanson Robotics' internal models. Coincidence?" Whispers spread through the courtroom. Jared's stomach twisted. He wanted to stand up and scream that it was all false, but his lawyer placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Wait," she murmured. "Our time will come." The defense's stand. When it was Ms. Reeves' turn, her voice carried quiet steel. "The prosecution shows you what they want you to see, a video, out of context, without verified timestamps or digital signatures. But this boy," she gestured to Elijah, "spent his nights studying mathematics by candlelight, not corporate espionage. His brilliance was not stolen. It was earned." Then she turned toward Detective Carver. "Detective, please approach the stand." Carver rose, carrying the sealed folder. He took the oath and adjusted his glasses. "Detective," Reeves began, "did you investigate the authenticity of the footage submitted as evidence against my client?" Yes, Carver said clearly. And what I found was alarming. The room fell silent. He opened the folder, pulling out printed stills and metadata reports. This footage was edited. The timestamps were manipulated, and the original file came not from Hanson Robotics servers, but from a backup server owned by Steel Dynamics, a direct competitor to Mr. Johnson's company. Gasps filled the room. The prosecutor objected immediately. Your Honor, this is hearsay. Overruled, said the judge. Continue. Carver nodded. We traced the upload trail through multiple proxy networks. The person who submitted this evidence to the press was a man named Richard Hale, formerly head of security for Mr. Johnson, now employed by Steel Dynamics. Jared's fists clenched. He'd suspected it. But hearing it confirmed under oath was a gut punch of both anger and relief. The turning point. Ms. Reeves paced slowly. So, Detective Carver, if this footage was fabricated, what does that mean for my client? Carver looked directly at the jury. It means Elijah Diaz was framed. Someone wanted to destroy his credibility, and by extension Mr. Johnson's, to damage Hanson Robotics' reputation before its European expansion deal. The judge leaned forward. Do you have proof of this connection? Carver held up a printed email chain. Yes, Your Honor. Financial transactions and correspondence between Hale and Steele's executive team, showing payment for digital intervention and media diversion. The room erupted again, reporters typing furiously, flashes going off, murmurs rippling like waves. Jared felt his chest tighten. He looked at Elijah, whose eyes were wide, disbelief melting into tears. For the first time since the arrest, truth was visible, like light cutting through smoke. The Billionaire's confession. When the defense rested, the judge asked, does the witness wish to speak in his own defense? Elijah hesitated. No, Your Honor. But someone else does. All eyes turned to Jared Johnson as he rose slowly from his seat. The murmurs exploded again. Is he going to testify? The billionaire himself. Jared stepped into the witness box. He didn't look like a CEO now. His suit was simple, his eyes tired, his voice raw. Mr. Johnson, the judge began, are you aware that your testimony could affect the future of your company and its investors? I am, Jared said quietly. But I'm more aware of what my silence has already cost. Ms. Reeves nodded. Please, Mr. Johnson. Tell the court what happened. Jared took a deep breath. I met Elijah Diaz on a plane. My baby wouldn't stop crying. Nothing worked. Then this boy from economy class walked up, calm and gentle, and in seconds, my son was laughing. That moment changed everything I thought I knew about class, about worth. And every time a child's laughter echoed through a foundation hall, Jared remembered the first one, at 35,000 feet, on that fateful flight where the universe rewrote his purpose. One late evening, Jared found Elijah alone in the research wing of the Foundation's new headquarters. The walls were covered with sketches and equations. You should be sleeping, Jared teased lightly. Elijah grinned. And you should retire. Jared chuckled, leaning against the doorframe. Can't. You'd burn the place down with ambition. Elijah's expression softened. You ever think about how it started? Jared nodded. Every day. A crying baby. A stranger who cared. That moment broke something in me, in the best way. Elijah turned, his voice low. You gave me more than a home. You gave me belief, not in wealth, but in worth. Jared looked at him quietly, then smiled. And you gave me back my heart. They stood there in silence for a while, two souls bound by an act neither of them had planned, but both were forever changed by. Hanson's laughter returns. The next weekend, the Foundation held its first global summit in New York City. Young prodigies from 30 countries filled the hall, children, teens, parents, mentors, all gathered under a golden banner that read, The Hanson Foundation, a future born from laughter. As Elijah walked to the stage to speak, Jared held Hanson in his arms, now a toddler. The crowd quieted. Elijah stood before them, once the poor boy on a plane, now a visionary leader. He smiled. When I met Mr. Johnson, I thought he was the man who had everything. But he showed me something more valuable than money. He showed me that the greatest wealth we can share is belief. He gestured to the crowd. And belief is what all of you represent. You're here because someone somewhere decided to look past what you don't have and see who you are. That's the power that changes the world. Applause thundered through the hall. Cameras flashed. Hansen clapped his tiny hands, and then, just as before, burst into uncontrollable laughter. The sound filled the auditorium, pure and contagious. People began laughing with him, tears in their eyes, hearts open. Jared felt a lump in his throat as he looked at Elijah on stage. It's come full circle, he thought. The same laughter that once embarrassed me now inspires the world. A quiet night, a shared purpose. Later that night, after the summit, Jared and Sarah stood by the balcony of their home overlooking the city. Hansen slept peacefully inside. Elijah joined them, hands in his pockets, quiet as always. Sarah turned to him. You know, she said softly, I think God sent you to us. Not to fix our lives, but to remind us what they're for. Elijah smiled faintly. Maybe he sent you to me, so I'd know what love without judgment feels like. Jared placed a hand on his shoulder. You've built something that'll outlive us both. I hope you know that. Elijah looked out at the skyline, towers of gold and glass glowing against the night. I don't want it to outlive us, he said. I want it to inspire whoever comes after. The city was quiet for a long while. Then from inside the house, Hansen's laughter drifted through the open door, soft, innocent, full of life. Jared smiled. There it is again. Elijah nodded. Proof that some sounds never fade, they just find new ears to heal. If laughter could heal one family, could it heal the world? The spring air carried a quiet peace over Brooklyn. Birds chirped over the rows of renovated homes that had once been worn and gray. Sunlight painted everything in new color, the kind that said, change had come, and it had chosen to stay. Elijah Diaz stood at the edge of his old street, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers and a paper bag filled with groceries. He stared at the house in front of him, the same one where he'd grown up with his mother and little sister. But it wasn't the same anymore. The walls had been repainted, soft cream with blue shutters. The porch no longer sagged, the roof no longer leaked. The new wooden sign above the door read, Diaz Family Home, built with love and belief. For the first time in years, Elijah felt tears sting his eyes. He knocked. The door opened, and there she was, his mother. Maria Diaz stood still for a moment, disbelief frozen on her face. Then her lips trembled into a smile as her eyes filled with tears. Elijah, she whispered, voice breaking. He didn't say anything, just dropped the flowers, stepped forward, and wrapped his arms around her. For a long moment, mother and son held each other like the world around them had disappeared. The years of struggle, the nights she worked double shifts cleaning offices, the mornings he skipped breakfast so his sister could eat, all of it melted away. You came home, she murmured against his shoulder. I told you I would, Elijah replied softly. Just needed to make sure I had something worth coming home with. When they finally pulled apart, Maria cupped his face. You've grown so much. You look peaceful. Elijah smiled. I think I finally know who I am, Mom. The house that hope rebuilt. Inside, the living room glowed with warmth, sunlight streaming through clean curtains, a small plant growing on the windowsill. There was laughter from the kitchen, his little sister Rosa, now 12, humming while setting the table. Elijah, she squealed, running and jumping into his arms. You're famous. My teacher showed your speech in class. He laughed, spinning her around. Famous? Nah. Just lucky to have a sister who believes in me. Maria wiped her eyes. She never stopped talking about you. Even when people in the neighborhood said you'd forgotten us. Elijah looked around the room, seeing the new furniture, the repaired walls. I could never forget this place. This is where everything started. Maria nodded. I know. Jared told me what you two built, the foundation. He came here last month while you were overseas. Helped finish the renovation. Elijah paused, surprised. He did. She smiled. Said this house was part of your story. Said it deserved to stand strong again. Elijah's throat tightened. He didn't tell me. He didn't need to, she said gently. He just wanted to make sure when you came home, you'd remember where your purpose began. A heart-to-heart over dinner. That evening, they ate dinner together for the first time in years, rice, beans, roasted chicken, and laughter filling the small kitchen. Maria watched her son's face, his eyes brighter than she remembered. "You look happy," she said. "I am," Elijah replied. "But not because of success, or fame, or even the foundation. I'm happy because I finally understand something." Maria tilted her head. "What's that?" Elijah looked at her, the woman who sacrificed everything for him. "I didn't just find opportunity," he said slowly. "I found purpose." Her eyes shimmered. "And what's your purpose, Mijo?" He smiled. "To make sure no kid with potential ever feels unseen again. To give them what I had, a chance. Because one person believed in me, and that changed everything." Maria reached across the table, taking his hand. "You always had that in you, Elijah. Your father would be proud." "I hope so," Elijah whispered. "I still hear his voice sometimes, telling me to be kind, no matter how cruel the world seems." "And you listened," she said softly. "That's why you're where you are." 2 days later, a black car pulled up in front of the house. Elijah looked out the window and smiled. Jared Johnson stepped out, carrying Hanson, now a chubby, bright-eyed toddler, who was giggling before they even reached the porch. Maria opened the door. "Mr. Johnson," she greeted warmly. "Please," he said with a humble smile. "Call me Jared. And this little troublemaker is Hanson." Maria laughed as Hanson waved a small toy airplane. "So this is the boy whose laughter changed everything." Elijah stood behind her, grinning. "Still laughing, huh?" Hanson's eyes lit up the moment he saw him. He stretched his arms out, babbling with joy. Elijah took him, and the child erupted into uncontrollable giggles, the same laugh that had once silenced a plane full of strangers. Jared stood in the doorway, his eyes glistening. "That sound," he said quietly, "still reminds me that love is louder than fear." Later, while Maria and Rosa played with Hanson in the living room, Jared and Elijah stepped out into the backyard. The evening breeze carried the smell of jasmine and rain-soaked pavement. Jared looked up at the skyline, then at Elijah. "You've built something incredible," he said. "But there's something I never told you." Elijah glanced at him. "What's that?" Jared's voice grew soft. "When I first saw you holding my son, I didn't see a savior. I saw what I was missing: faith. Humanity. You gave me back something I'd lost a long time ago." Elijah frowned. "You've given me more than I could ever repay." Jared shook his head. "You already have." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I see you as the son I never had before Hanson." The words hit Elijah like a wave. His chest tightened, tears forming before he could stop them. He turned away slightly. "I don't know what to say." Jared smiled faintly. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me something, that you'll never let the world make you doubt your worth again." Elijah nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I promise." They stood there for a moment, mentor and protege, father and son not by blood, but by bond. And in that silence, something unspoken but eternal passed between them. The first steps. Maria called from inside. "Come in, both of you. Hanson's about to walk." They rushed in, laughing. Hanson stood wobbling near the couch, his tiny hands outstretched. Elijah crouched across from him, arms open. "Come on, buddy," he encouraged softly. "You can do it." Jared stood beside Maria, watching, his eyes damp. Hanson took one hesitant step, then another, and then, to everyone's amazement, stumbled straight into Elijah's arms. The room erupted with cheers and laughter. Elijah held the child close, his eyes closing as if the moment itself was holy. Jared looked at him, this boy from the other side of the world, now part of his family, and whispered, "You were always meant to be here." Maria wiped her tears, smiling. "See? Even the baby knows who he trusts." Elijah laughed through his own tears. "Guess he's smarter than all of us." A family redefined. That night, after dinner, they all sat together in the softly lit living room, Maria sewing, Rosa drawing, Jared telling stories of his travels, and Elijah building tiny paper planes with Hanson. There was no luxury here, no chandeliers or marble floors, just warmth, laughter, and belonging. Jared looked around the room, his heart full. "You know," he said, "for a man who spent his life building robots, I never thought I'd find my humanity again. Elijah smiled. Sometimes, it's not about building something new. It's about remembering what's real. Maria nodded. Family, she said simply. That's what's real. Jared met her eyes. Family isn't always born. Sometimes it's found. Elijah's gaze softened. Then I guess I found mine. The laughter that never fades. Before leaving that night, Jared lifted Hanson and kissed his forehead. Elijah walked them to the car. The street was quiet, moonlight spilling across the pavement. Jared turned to him one last time. You've changed the way I see the world, Elijah. Don't ever forget that. Elijah smiled. You changed mine first. Hanson giggled again, that same melodic laugh that had started it all. The sound echoed down the street, bouncing between the houses, mingling with the night air. And for a moment, it felt like the universe itself was laughing along, in gratitude, in peace, in love. What if family wasn't defined by blood, but by the moments that change us? A year later, the world had changed, not in the way technology promised, but in the way humanity hoped. The Hanson Foundation had become a name whispered in classrooms, echoed in community centers, and printed on the dreams of children from Lagos to Lima. Its mission was simple yet profound, to find the unheard geniuses hidden in forgotten places, and give them a voice. What began with one laugh at 35,000 feet had rippled into something far greater. The Foundation's rise. At the Foundation's global headquarters in London, a sleek building designed not from glass and steel, but from light and purpose, Elijah Diaz stood before a crowd of journalists, students, and educators from around the world. He was no longer the timid boy with the torn backpack. Now he wore confidence like it had always belonged to him. A modest suit, a warm smile, and the same eyes that once carried exhaustion now carried hope. Behind him, projected on a massive screen, was the Foundation's motto: education, empathy, elevation. Exactly 1 year ago, Elijah began, his voice calm yet commanding, I was on a flight that changed my life. I didn't have much, not money, not connections, not even a full meal that day. But I had something powerful: compassion. I saw a crying baby and just wanted to help. He smiled softly, glancing toward the front row, where Jared Johnson sat beside his wife, Sarah, holding little Hanson, now almost walking and waving shyly at the cameras. That moment, Elijah continued, wasn't just about calming a child. It was about proving something, that humanity is louder than hate, that laughter is stronger than division. The audience erupted in applause. Global change. A montage played across the big screen, a cinematic wave of stories that the Hanson Foundation had inspired. A girl from Nairobi who built a solar-powered irrigation system for her village. A boy from Mumbai who created an app to help children with dyslexia read fluently. A young refugee from Syria who, after being discovered by the Foundation's outreach team, went on to design a low-cost prosthetic limb. Each story had a face, a name, and a beginning, all traced back to one laugh on an airplane. Elijah watched, his heart full. These kids, he said quietly, they remind me every day that genius doesn't belong to privilege, it belongs to persistence. A new role for Jared. When the applause faded, Jared took the stage next. He'd stepped down as CEO of Hanson Robotics 6 months earlier. His days of stock charts and quarterly calls had been replaced by classrooms and field visits. People used to call me a man of innovation, Jared said, smiling gently. But I wasn't. Not really. I was a man of isolation, until one boy and one laugh reminded me that real innovation isn't about machines or money. It's about giving others the tools to rise. He paused, looking at Elijah. I spent half my life building robots. Now, I spend it building humans. The crowd laughed, but there was a tear in Jared's eye. He turned toward the boy, now the man, who'd become his greatest legacy. Elijah, you didn't just save my son that day, Jared said. You saved me. Elijah bowed his head slightly, humbled. Sarah reached out from the audience, squeezing her husband's hand. Beside her, Hanson clapped, laughing in that same pure, unstoppable way that once silenced a plane and united two worlds. Full circle moment. Later that week, Elijah boarded another flight, not as a passenger in economy, but as the keynote speaker heading to an education summit in Singapore. The air was calm, the engines humming softly. He sat by the window, notebook open, jotting thoughts about a new scholarship fund when it happened. The unmistakable cry of a baby pierced the air. Passengers groaned. A few rolled their eyes. The mother, young and clearly exhausted, bounced the baby in her arms, whispering desperately. Elijah smiled. It was like déjà vu. He stood up quietly, made his way down the aisle, and stopped near the mother. "Excuse me," he said softly, "may I try?" She blinked, uncertain. You think you can help?" "I can try," Elijah replied. He gently reached for the baby, humming a simple tune, the same melody he had once used with Hanson. The baby's cries turned into hiccups, then soft coos, and finally laughter. The same magical, contagious laugh that once changed his destiny now echoed through the cabin. Passengers turned, smiling. A flight attendant whispered, "It's happening again." Elijah handed the baby back to her mother, who looked at him with tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "How did you do that?" He smiled. "Just kindness. It always works better than panic." As he returned to his seat, an elderly man beside him said, "Young man, that was remarkable. You should be proud." Elijah chuckled. "I'm just paying it forward." He looked out the window, at the clouds bathed in golden sunlight, and thought of Jared Hansen, and that first flight that changed everything. Weeks later, that in-flight video went viral. Someone had captured the moment, the crying baby, the calm stranger, the laughter that followed. The headlines read, "History repeats, the boy who once stopped a plane now inspires the world again." The internet flooded with comments. "He's the man who proved humanity isn't lost." "This is what true influence looks like." "Kindness is the new revolution." Elijah didn't respond to any of them. He didn't need to. The message spoke for itself. Months later, at a quiet dinner in the Johnsons' London home, Elijah, Jared, Sarah, and little Hanson sat together around a long white table. The chandeliers shimmered, but the real glow came from the peace between them. Hanson, now talking in short bursts, sat on Elijah's lap, playing with his tie. "You know," Jared said thoughtfully, "if someone told me 2 years ago that a crying baby would change the course of my life, I would have laughed." Sarah smiled. "And yet here we are, laughing because it did." Elijah grinned. "It's funny, isn't it? How chaos can become a blessing." Jared raised his glass. "To chaos, then, and to compassion." They clinked glasses. Elijah looked at Hanson and whispered, "You started all this, little guy." One laugh, that's all it took. The child laughed again, that same melodic sound that once united strangers, restored faith, and sparked a global movement. The camera fades to the clouds, the gentle hum of an airplane in the distance. Elijah's voice narrates softly, calm, grounded, full of gratitude. "It began with a laugh, one small sound that proved humanity is louder than hate. I used to think kindness was weakness, but I was wrong. Kindness is power. It's the currency that never loses value. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life or the world is one moment of compassion. One act of kindness. One simple laugh. Can change destinies. If one laugh could bridge the gap between worlds, what's stopping yours from doing the same? If this story moved you, don't just scroll, share it. Subscribe to the Billionaire's Enclave for more true-to-soul stories where power meets purpose, and humanity always wins.